interesting divisions going on here in the United States. Tell us, this was one that you picked up on. Tell us what's going on here.
So Axios picked up on a polling analysis from a guy on Substack, which I thought was really interesting because the polls that he was collating basically were everywhere yesterday. It was almost like the Beltway didn't realize. This is from Bruce Mehlman on his Substack, brucemehlman.substack.com. Then Axios picked up on it. It's almost like people here in the Beltway, Ryan, are out of touch. He had picked up on this NBC News poll, and then Axios ran this NBC News graph from a deck that Bruce Mehlman reported on that's found Gen Z is less than half as likely as the baby boomers to say patriotism, belief in God, and having children are, quote, very important to them. Now, I think where this is even more interesting is the massive decline. So it's not just half as likely, it's that you had baby boomers somewhere around 76% when it came to the questions of whether patriotism was, quote, very important. 76%. People between the ages of 18 and 26, 32%. So yes, less than half is likely, but that's coming down from a very high level, 76%. Belief in God and religion, 65% to 26%, huge difference there. Having children, quote, being very important, 52% to 23%. And another really big one here, America being the best place to live, 66% for the baby boomers, 33% for Gen Z. That, again, was from an NBC News poll that was done by Public Opinion Strategies that Bruce Mehlman picked up on and then Axios reported on, and people were just sending like wildfire throughout like kind of DC media circles yesterday. I'm not surprised at all by these numbers. I don't know, Brian, are you surprised at all by these numbers?
Did we cover this didn't you flag this for us when it first came out?
We've covered similar ones because it does repeatedly show up in polls. This is probably the starkest divide that I've seen generationally. It's not surprising, but when you're asking sort of big questions, patriotism and America, the best place to live, like very broad themes, to see it show up, I mean, obviously it's interesting, but it's not surprising at all. And this reminds me of what we've talked about on college campuses. And my perspective from the right on the campus protests is washing a lot of this away as anti-Semitism, lumping it all together with bigotry. You know, when we had that great conversation with Safia Southi, one of the organizers at Columbia, it's so abundantly clear that this is not anti-Semitism from her and some of the other organizers. It's not to say there isn't actual bigotry and anti-Semitism. We had conversations about that too. Right. It was disgusting. But from many of these students, they have an entirely different worldview. They're approaching consensus. I mean, this is a flip-flop. If baby boomers have a consensus on whether America is the best place to live or that patriotism is very important, which they do basically, because they're at 76% on that. Gen Z not being at 76% on that is approaching a position of consensus on a worldview. So no kidding. You know, there was polling that found most of college students weren't protesting, they weren't in the encampments, and that, you know, maybe the opinions of some of the hardcore protesters weren't representative of their peers broadly. That may be the case, but what we're seeing here is pretty clear as to why their other students weren't, you know, picking them up and throwing them out of their tents, and it's because there is this deep widespread sentiment that America is not the best place to live, that patriotism is not very important.
And there was there's an interesting annual survey that comes out that asks people how democratic their country is, and then they'll say these are the 10 countries where, you know, people feel like the most democratic. China was in the top 10, like Chinese people, because when people think of democracy, they think of the ability, basically, of people. Or I would say the ability of the government to respond to the public's majoritarian wishes. Yeah. Like what was fascinating is that in the top 10, there was no correlation between kind of the trappings of procedural democracy, like midterm elections, parliamentary elections, presidential elections, and whether or not somebody felt like they were in a democratic country. Like France was in the bottom top 10. They have elections. The U.S. was not in the top 10 of feeling, or people saying that they felt like they lived in a democratic country. So there were some that were, you know, procedurally democratic, but there were others that were not. But I don't think you can disconnect what those students are feeling from the cost of college too.
Right.
Like the whole glory of the U.S. for the post-World War II era has been our college system.
Ticket to the middle class.
Ticket to the middle class. Everybody else, all these old people tell you it's the best 4 years of their life.
Find your purpose.
They
fulfill your calling.
They find themselves.
Yep.
Like they develop intellectually and spiritually, and then they're thrown into the maw of the economy. But at least they're moving upwards.
Well, you're in accruing terrifying debt with every year.
Right. But now you are accruing all of this debt, and you are worried that you're just downwardly mobile relative to previous generations. And so the paradox of those numbers is that if you compare kind of the median net worth of an American 25-year-old or 20-year-old to basically anyone else in the world, the Americans are doing better. But they sense that they're losing ground constantly.
The thing is,
so it doesn't help to be told, well, you're ahead now.
Right, and it's
when you're like headed downhill.
But that's what's so tough. Like, you are ahead compared to other places in the world. You are not ahead compared to what was happening and where you could have been in a prior generation. So you see your grandparents.
You don't compare yourself to people around the world. You compare yourself to previous generations and people here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I look at my grandparents, military career, owned a home and had 7 kids on 1 income in the Milwaukee area. Like, that's incredible and totally unattainable for anybody now. So when they can't do union, like when you can't do that, you're looking at 66% of people and baby boomers saying America's the best place to live to 33% now. Patriotism is going to decline. And then you see the having children thing, which freaks a lot of people on the right out. Only 23% of Gen Z saying that's very important to them. Well, how are they supposed to have kids when their ticket to the middle class has left them thrown into the maw with, the rungs up the ladder, having been kicked out and broken? It's like, what did you think was going to happen? What did you think was going to happen? You look at decline in belief in God. I mean, there's just chaos, to your point. This Bruce Mehlman Substack, this one makes me the most sad in this 6-chart Sunday thing that Axios picked up on. He said, Americans under 30 rating their lives came in 62nd among nations in the World Happiness Report. Americans 60 plus ranked 10th. So if you're over 60 in America, you're about 10th in the worldwide happiness ranking. If you're under 30, you're all the way down at 62. It's tragic. I mean, and you can understand why that shows up in the other numbers pretty easily when you see such a stark divide.
Oh, I found the top 10 list here, or maybe not the whole top 10. Arnaud Bertrand, the Twitter account, posted this. It's from the allianceofdemocracies.org. You can find their report. The countries whose citizens most perceive themselves as living in democracy are China, Switzerland, Singapore, Israel, Norway, Vietnam. That's the top list there, and the Republic of Congo. For those 7 countries, more than 75% of people are on the 7 to 10 scale, where they ask the question, think about your country today. How democratic do you think it is? Where 0, not at all democratic, very democratic. China, it's fascinating. China and Switzerland next to each other.
It's super interesting.
And then now here's the list of countries where less than half of the people say they live in democracy. Japan, which has all the trappings of procedural democracy. Pakistan, which also has the trappings. They hold elections, as we've covered here. The people are correct there, not remotely democratic. France, Nigeria, Iran, Peru, which recently had its president impeached after the first indigenous president basically ever in Peru. The white people quickly impeached him. Morocco, Turkey, Ukraine. They don't even have the procedural trappings of democracy anymore. They'll get to that eventually, they say.
Yeah, well, and so does Blinken. And he's like, watch this drive, but it's actually watch this solo.
Hungary, which has elections, but the elections are controlled by the right-wing government there. The media is completely controlled by the right-wing government there. There was an effort to contest the election. It didn't have a hope. Venezuela and Greece. So these are the people who don't believe that they live in democracies. Anyway.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.